Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do another episode of Was the Book Better? Today I want to talk about gore. Not like blood and guts and gore, but like G-O-R, gore. The name of the book is The Tarnsmen of Gor by John Norman, and the movie is called Gore. Um, these are, I originally got interested in these because these were a form of sword and planet sort of stories. The book originally came out, I think, in 1968. It's been around for a long time, um, and it's a like I said, it's a sword and planet sort of story. It features a guy who's never really known his father, who kind of knocks around for a bit. He becomes an English professor, I believe, in New Hampshire or Vermont, it's in New England somewhere. Um, and he goes out hiking, and while he's out hiking, basically a UFO lands, and he hears his father's voice, and he just somehow knows that it's his father's voice, and then he wakes up on this planet called Gore. Um, Very heavily inspired, like most sword and planets, it's heavily inspired by a Princess of Mars. That's one of the reasons why that was the first one I wanted to talk about. And uh, similar to Princess of Mars, Gore is ever so slightly smaller, so the effect of gravity is a little less. Not to the degree of Princess of Mars. On there, John Carter was like Superman. He was like the original sort of version of Superman. He could leap very far distances, and he was just super strong and could kill, a huge Green Man warrior with one punch and that sort of thing. In this story, Tarl Cabot, who is the main character's name, he isn't quite that strong, but it's ever so much there. It's a fun book. I wouldn't say it's great. Um, I found it, I don't know, I found a lot of it serve a little boring, kind of drags on a little bit in some places. There's not really much depth of character, although what's interesting is we do get to see his view on slavery, because most people, if they know anything about the Gore books, the Gorian sagas or books, I'm not sure, is it's very heavily on about slavery, about BDSM, particularly about men dominating and owning women. Um, Causes a lot of sort of uh, uh, controversy, and it always has. This is not something new. It's not like the feminists of the day have gotten kind of upset about it. In fact, someone even said that John Norman wrote the book, kind of crafted this world as an answer to feminism. Not sure if there's any truth to that or not. Um, in this book, in the Tarnsmen of Gor, he gets into the slavery a little bit. He gets into a little bit of like what it's like to be a slave, and the way people think of it. It's not even always just sexual slavery too. It's just a lot of people being worked to death and that sort of thing. But there's certainly a sexual aspect to it. So in that sense, there's a little bit of naughtiness, but it's really not that bad. And in most of the book, Tarl Cabot doesn't like the slavery. He doesn't like how he doesn't like that whole society or that whole societal system, and he refuses to take part in it in various times throughout the book. So that's an aspect that we kind of get to see of the real character. I think the people who will really like this book, Tarnsmen of Gor, are people who like world building, because that's definitely something John Norman did a lot of in this book. I'm I'm always okay with world building, but it's not my main thing that I like to focus on. And he had a lot of that stuff in there. And it's kind of fun because he had some other aspects of making it a science fantasies type story, that instead of people riding around on horses, I don't believe there's a single horse on the planet, they either rode around like these giant lizard things, or they flew around in like giant birds. They were supposed to be like big sparrows or something like that. And that's what the Tarn is. And so the Tarnsmen of Gor are the warriors who ride these crazy dangerous birds and fly around and that sort of thing. It also gets a lot into like sort of a little bit of political intrigue of one city state invading other city states, and some covert action to try and take down these sort of city states. And so if you like that, there's a bit of that in this story as well. So that's why I think that's one of the reasons why it's hung around since before I was born. I was born in 1969. Is because I think a lot of people really like the world building. And then, of course, there's the naughty aspect. I've been told future books, which I haven't read. I've only read that first one. Um, Future books get much more into the slave aspect. I believe some of the books have been are told from the perspective of women who have been dragged to. They've been sort of kidnapped to Gor. So it's like human women on Earth or now find themselves on Gor, where they're just treated as property and slaves. Been told he depicts rapes in there. I don't know. I haven't read those. And I do know that the Gorian sort of lifestyle is really big in the BDSM, or at least it used to be. I remember back in the 90s when the internet first kind of came out, we had all these sort of like chat rooms and the message boards and stuff, and there'd just be whole sections dedicated to Gorian lifestyle. I was never really into that sort of thing, so I never kept up with it. I don't know if it's still big. If you do, put it in the comments because I'm just kind of curious about is this lifestyle still around? Because there are people who like live like the Gorian code. They have master slave kind of relationships, and the women wear a certain kind of clothing. And if you do a Google search for images, I'm sure you'll find a lot of women or people in their Gorian clothes and that sort of thing. So it's a big lifestyle that a lot of people have gotten into. And John Norman is still writing. I believe the last book came out like a year or two ago. It had it's not like these books were written in the 60s and 70s and then died off. He just kept on writing. And I think especially nowadays with indie publishing, he's probably just as prolific as he was before. I've been told that for a while, no publisher would carry his books because just of the controversy. No one wanted to be that publisher and get hounded and that sort of thing. Kind of almost like the first version of cancel culture, if you will. But now, thanks to Amazon and indie publishing, he can put out his own books, and I think all of the books can be found online. And actually, a lot of them are in audiobooks. I listen to the Tarnsmen of Gor as well, which actually I really like the audiobook. I like their narrator. He did a good job of telling the story. He did a good job of like doing all the different voices. Like some narrators, if they're a man, they can't really do a woman's voice and it just sounds kind of cringy. He was actually really good. So if you don't really necessarily want to read the book, the audiobook is actually pretty good. I guess I got that on Audible as well. For me though, I liked the book. I didn't hate it. It wasn't a book that I had to like force myself to get through. I just don't think I'd ever go back to it. There was something about it that just kind of was lacking. Maybe if I read like the second book or the third book, I'd get into it. I think it's the first three books are sort of like your standard sword and planet science fantasy kind of story, and then after that he starts getting a little more into like the sexual aspects and stuff. I also do want to say like I think the controversy is like way overblown. I'll hear people complain about he's denigrating to women, he's humiliating women. It's it's got the bondage stuff and rape and all this sort of stuff. And then I look at 50 Shades of Grey, and how many millions of copies did that sell? Like I think 50 million, maybe more. That's the last number I can think of. They had 3 movies, all of which were like made money. They at least made their money back. And I can guarantee you, it ain't men that's reading these books. It's not men that's watching these movies, unless they're like their wife or their girlfriend drags them to it. The most of the women who participate in BDSM culture, they're doing it totally consensually. Of course, I'm sure there's some they're coerced into it, they're forced into it, and we definitely need to make sure that stops. But if women consensually want to partake in a lifestyle for whatever reason, then let them. I mean, guys do it too. Nobody's running out trying to save all the men from these degrading, humiliating situations. In fact, we kind of laugh at or make jokes about it more than anything else. So, to me, I think it's an overblown controversy. It's one of those that, and I look at a lot of the romance and erotica that's being written out there. Some of it is your classic kind of Harlequin romance. Boy meets girl. Girl. They fall in love. They ride off into the sunset together. But a lot of the other stuff, especially a lot of the indie published stuff, it's way worse than anything I've ever heard of that's happening in the Gorian sagas. And like I said, a lot of stuff is written by women for women. So I think a lot of times it is people who I think part of it is also your traditional science fiction fan may not want that stuff in their books. I think there's a little bit of that. There's this John Norman guy polluting our science fiction with his, weirdo slave culture kind of thing. And to me, it's like, science fiction, pretty broad, hits a lot of different groups, and it's not that bad. But like I said, I'm probably not going to read past this first book. So if you've read the other books, I'd love to hear more about it. I'd like to get one person's perspective, more people's perspective on it. Because when I've kind of did a little internet search to see what other people were talking about, that seemed to be like the main topic that they talked about was that aspect. And to me, it's sort of like, no, it's just a fun science fantasy more than anything else. The movie, however, I think the movie came out in 1988. Or 87. I was in high school when it came out. I don't believe I saw it in the theaters because I saw a lot of bad movies when I was younger, but I don't think that was one of them. But it is on Amazon Prime, so I watched it on there. And they made Gor. It's just called Gor, and I've been told they made a sequel. I'm not going to watch the sequel because the first one was actually pretty bad. It has almost nothing to do with the book. Almost nothing. There is a character named Tarl Cabot who ends up on Gor. Instead of a UFO, he has a car crash and somehow is just beamed to Gor. I don't believe his father has any part to play with it at all. There are no Tarns. There's no giant lizards. People are riding horses because it's a low budget and like really looks low budget too. It's like not even good cosplay kind of costumes, that sort of thing. People would laugh at him if they're at San Diego Comic-Con. They have these slave aspects. They actually play that up quite a bit. There's a lot of action scenes. They're not really very well done. I'm trying to even remember if I even remember what the... Oh, well, yeah, the whole thing is that he has to steal back the homestone, which is that is from the books as well. Each city has their own little homestone, and that is sort of like their spiritual practice here. But except in the book, the homestone is his key to get back home, to get back to Earth. And so that's the whole thing, is someone has stolen the homestone and he's trying to steal it back. Really, the only thing that I kind of remember from it was Rebecca Ferrati. She was a model and actress in the late 80s, early 90s. I think she was also like a Playboy Playmate or something like that. And what I really remember is like her hair. Oh, of course she's hot too, but she has very 80s hair. It's kind of huge. And so there's that. And of course, a lot of people run around skimpy clothing because it's filmed in a desert. There's a big girl fight scene, which it's kind of odd because in one sense it is like, okay, I know what you're doing. This is Rebecca Ferrati and some other girl wrestling around, but in a way it's actually kind of a pretty good fight scene. I mean, it's not that great, but so I believe if you like Sword and Planet, if you like science fantasy type stories, it's worth reading Tarnsmen of Gor, and you might like it. I would, unless you like watching bad movies, then I wouldn't bother with Gor. Gor was basically another one of those sort of stories that they were trying to build off of the popularity of Conan. Conan the Barbarian, the original Arnold Schwarzenegger movie when it came out in '82, was the Star Wars of fantasy stories. Just as Star Wars, when it came out in '77, that transformed science fiction. You can draw a line between what science fiction looked like and felt like before and after Star Wars. One of the biggest sci-fi movies before Star Wars was Logan's Run. Now I love Logan's Run. It's a great movie. I remember seeing it as a kid when I was in the theaters. But it's very much a 70s movie. It looks like everybody's hanging out at a disco. It's filmed in a shopping mall in Dallas or Fort Worth or something else like that. It's just really kind of, it's low budget. It's very 70s, like I said. The Farrah Fawcett has the hair and all this sort of stuff. And then after Star Wars, then that's sort of what everybody wants their science fiction to look like. And that's when we got Battlestar Galactica after that, and a lot more of the movies. They didn't do necessarily a really good job, but they at least tried to do a better job with like the models and the costumes and the sets, because they knew that that's what people were expecting now. Fantasy didn't really get the same kind of treatment, sort of, but Conan the Barbarian came out, and it was a huge hit. Everybody loved it. Everybody loves Arnold, and so everybody wanted to build on this sword and sorcery franchise, but nobody was really willing to like put the money into it, and so they didn't even bother really to try. So because if you watch the original Conan, there's great sets, there's great costumes, sword fights, and lots of people and that sort of thing, and then when you watch movies like Gor and you see, oh yeah, they're trying to be like Arnold, but it's just not working. They don't want to spend the money. They don't even want to really try that hard. And so Gore kind of falls in that category. There was a slew of sword and sorcery movies that came out in the 80s. I think they're great because I just like sword and sorcery. Even if they're bad and they're low budget, I still have fun watching them. And Gore kind of just fit into that sort of camp. But yeah, if you've seen the book, if you've seen the movie, or if you read the book, please post in the comments. I'd like to hear more from folks. I'm the only person I know who's actually read these books, read the book or watched the movie. So I'd be kind of interested to see what other people thought of it. And then, yeah, I got my other books in links down below. I do want to warn you, I'm going to take down, I have the free book, Yarick the Scholar, and I'm going to take that down in the next few weeks or so. I'm going to repackage it, and I'm going to try and take out the stories where I sell those individually, and then I'm going to repackage it. I might have new stories in there, but it's not going to be free anymore. So if you want a free book, go down in the comments and make sure you click on that link. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.